He was just a boy, quiet, polite, and brilliant in ways no one could imagine. But in a world where prejudice runs deep, brilliance can be invisible to the wrong eyes. One wealthy man thought it would be funny to invite him to a chess match, expecting an easy win and a good laugh. What happened next shattered his arrogance, exposing an ugly truth and leaving everyone in the room questioning what they thought they knew. This isn't just a game of chess, it's a story about respect, resilience, and the moment the underestimated became unforgettable. Jamal was only 10, but his mind worked like a seasoned strategist. He lived with his mother, Clarissa, in the small servants' quarters behind one of the wealthiest estates in town. Clarissa worked tirelessly as a live-in maid for the Beaumont family, a name synonymous with influence, old money, and social circles that rarely looked beyond their own. For Jamal, the mansion was both a playground and a prison, grand halls and manicured lawns he could see but never truly belonged to. Life for him was simple, mornings filled with schoolwork, afternoons helping his mother, and evenings lost in the quiet joy of puzzles and an old, worn chess set his late grandfather had left him. He'd study the board for hours, imagining himself in grand tournaments, though no one outside his mother knew of his gift. Then came the weekend gathering, a lavish garden party where expensive wine flowed and conversations were thick. People with polished accents. It was here that Richard Beaumont, the family's patriarch, noticed Jamal lingering at the edge of the lawn. A smirk tugged at his lips as he called out to the boy, waving him over. Jamal didn't know it yet, but that invitation was never meant to be kind. It wasn't an opportunity, it was entertainment. A private joke for the wealthy man, who saw only a servant's son, not the mind hidden beneath. The pieces were being set on the board, although not in the way Richard had imagined. The garden party buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, the kind of polished elegance that made outsiders feel small without anyone saying a word. Richard Beaumont sat beneath a white canopy, his tailored suit catching the afternoon light. Guests gathered around him, eager for stories of his investments and travels. When his gaze caught Jamal again, that smirk returned. "Bring the board," he instructed a waiter as though summoning an entertainer. A polished mahogany chess set appeared moments later, its gleaming pieces a stark contrast to the worn wooden ones Jamal was used to. Richard patted the seat across from him. "Let's see what you've got, kid," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Laughter rippled through the group. To them, this was harmless fun, watching a child fumble against a man they assumed was superior in every way. Jamal sat down, his small hands steady despite the dozens of eyes on him. He had played countless games in the quiet of his room, but never with an audience like this. Still, the board looked the same as it always did. 64 squares, 30 to pieces. Richard opened aggressively, moving his pieces with a flourish meant to intimidate. The guests whispered, trading smug predictions about how quickly the game would end. Jamal listened in silence, studying the patterns, the overconfident moves. 5 minutes in, Richard's smile began to tighten. Jamal wasn't just keeping up, he was dictating the pace. A trap was forming, invisible to the man who thought he held all the control. The murmurs grew louder. Some guests leaned closer, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion. Clarissa, watching from the edge of the lawn, clenched her hands together. She knew her son's talent, but she also knew the danger of humiliating a man like Richard in front of his peers. Then came the moment. Jamal slid his rook across the board, cornering Richard's king. A few guests gasped. Richard frowned clearly, missing the trap until it was too late. With his next move, Jamal sealed it. Checkmate. The table fell silent. For a heartbeat, all that could be heard was the rustle of the wind through the garden. Richard's jaw tightened, his face flushing red. In the hush, the power dynamic shifted, not in terms of money or status, but in intellect. But what Jamal didn't know was that winning this game wasn't the end of the challenge. For Richard, it had just turned personal, and when men like Him felt embarrassed. They didn't forgive, they retaliated. Richard's face burned with humiliation, his laughter gone, replaced by a cold, cutting glare. The silence around the table was heavier than the humid afternoon air. Slowly, he leaned back, his voice calm but laced with venom. "Beginner's luck," he said, forcing a chuckle. But the look in his eyes told another story. As the guests dispersed, some avoiding Richard's gaze, others pretending nothing had happened, he motioned for one of the estate's staff to bring Jamal to the back garden. Clarissa caught the movement and instinctively stepped forward, but another maid gently shook her head. Richard stood by the stone fountain, hands clasped behind his back. "You like games, boy?" he asked quietly when Jamal approached. The tone was no longer playful, it was a warning. "Remember your place." Jamal didn't answer. His heart pounded, but his gaze stayed fixed on the rippling water. He'd grown up knowing that speaking the wrong word, even in defense of himself, could cost his mother her job or worse. Then Richard leaned down, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "You made me look small today. People like me. We don't forget that." The words cut deeper than any insult. It wasn't just about chess anymore, it was about control, about power, about reminding Jamal that, no matter his talent, the world outside that 64-square board would always be stacked against him. Clarissa appeared in the distance, her face pale, calling her son back inside. Richard didn't stop him, but the look he gave as Jamal walked away was a promise. This wasn't over. For the first time that day, Jamal's hands trembled, not from fear of losing a game, but from knowing he had just entered one he could never truly win, and the most dangerous part. He didn't even know the rules. Jamal didn't speak of that afternoon for weeks. The chessboard that once brought him joy now sat untouched in the corner of his room, its pieces gathering dust. It wasn't the game he feared, it was the reminder that talent, no matter how extraordinary, could still be overshadowed by prejudice. Clarissa carried on with her work, but she moved quietly, careful not to draw Richard's attention. She had seen that look before, the one that meant trouble could come without warning, disguised as discipline, or worse, as opportunity, but Jamal hadn't forgotten. Late at night, he would replay the match in his mind, every move, every moment. Richard's confidence cracked. It was proof that his mind could stand toe-to-toe with anyone's, even if the world refused to see it. That truth was a quiet ember inside him, small but impossible to extinguish. Because this wasn't just a story about a boy and a chess game. It was about the invisible lines drawn in society, lines that say you belong here and you don't. It was about the way dignity can be stripped away in a moment, simply because of who you are, where you're from, or the color of your skin, and yet it was also about resilience. Jamal had won that day, even if it came with a cost. His victory was more than checkmate, it was a challenge to the unspoken rules of a rigged game. So the question remains, how many more prodigies, leaders, and visionaries will we overlook? Simply because we refuse to see past the surface.